Court ruled in favor of Michigan law. They were being sued by Grutter, who was a white female, who alleged that she was denied admissions into the law school based on her race because she met the qualifications of having a high 161 LSAT score and she had a 3.8 GPA. So her argument was that it was unconstitutional to deny her admittance into the law school. However, it was held by the court that they had in fact not violated the Equal Protection Clause because they had acted in a way that would further the advancement and further obtain educational benefits on behalf of a diverse student body. Now this case is important because that was a Supreme Court ruling in 2003, and that ruling had effect on the University of Texas in what we now know as the top 10% rule. After the Supreme Court said it was okay for Michigan law to do this, University of Texas instituted the policy where it admitted students automatically who came from the top 10% of their Texas schools. So that meant that students in perhaps less academically rigorous schools in poor minority areas were getting automatic admissions. And I'm sure a bunch of us have, experienced that in our high schools, and we've heard our counselors tell us about it. So affirmative action, it's just designed to counteract historic discrimination faced by ethnic minorities. It's also used in the workforce, it's used in a variety of places, but pertaining to the admissions process, it means that we can consider race as a factor for students who are applying to these higher end institutions. So which brings us back to the affirmative action in Fisher case. This case is prompting a lot of questions like, should we consider race as a factor in the admissions process? And in doing so, are we just in fact reversing all the progress we've made with the civil rights movements, and are we just committing reverse racism? UT's response was that they need race to be a factor in the admissions process because they are in fact not meeting their critical mass goal. And right now, this is what the lawyers are really arguing in the court today in opening arguments. They're trying to define what critical mass is. And every institution that's part of any university, any college, that's part of their goal. And all critical mass means is to create a diverse student body. Now, the reason why the arguments are getting heated right now is because there's no set statistical number for what critical mass is. Do we stop it when we reach 25% blacks, 20% Hispanics, 30%? There's no statistical number. And that's why the arguments are a bit more subjective right now. In a telephone interview with CNN, UT's President Bill Powers told reporters that critical mass is necessary to have the kind of educational environment that is going to prepare them for working in an increasingly global and diverse world. And quite frankly, we're just not there yet. They did a study with the UT students, and we all know that UT is a pretty good melting pot right now, and they found that a lot of students still feel that they're not accepted based on race, or they feel that there's a lot of, I guess, not necessarily segregation, but there's a lot of distinction between unique ethnic groups. The Asians feel like they're more friendly only towards other Asian students, the Hispanics are in their organizations, and no one feels as mixed as it should be. And then there was also, they interviewed the Greek life of UT, and the sororities and fraternities felt the same way. They felt that the Hispanic sorority dominated in numbers more so than the Hispanic numbers in like the more broad national sorority. So that was the response from the students. And who's at stake here? So a lot of people think that just the colleges are at stake right now and just the students, but the ripple effect is a lot more broader than that, because right now we have to look at colleges nationwide, but then we have to look at the admissions boards, because based on this Supreme Court ruling right now that's going to happen in a couple of weeks, it's going to dictate how they assess every applicant into their institution. Minorities are obviously going to be directly affected. High school students, a lot of people don't realize that right now juniors and sophomores in high schools are scouting out colleges. If this case goes in favor of Ms. Fisher, then it's going to dictate which colleges students look at and how they alter maybe their personal essays or what even schools they even send their applications to. Teachers are going to be affected. It's going to dictate what fills the classrooms at universities. And finally, people don't realize that businesses right now, Walmart, Staples, H-E-B, Costco, these big organizations in addition to Wall Street are really attentive right now to this Supreme Court case, because the generations and the types of students that we're turning out from colleges, those are their future employees. And they're really watching with bated breath to see who's going to be the new applicant pool for their firms and their companies. So what does the evidence show us? So colleges who implemented affirmative action, UT being the prime example, we saw that once they considered race in the individualized applications, beginning in 2005 after that Grutter case we spoke about, African American enrollment grew by over 21%. Now on the left you see colleges who removed affirmative action, and that just had negative effects. the University of California, Berkeley noticed an enrollment for blacks and Hispanics dropped by almost half. That's a substantial number. UCLA recorded a decrease in blacks from 7.3 in 95 to 2.7% of blacks in 2005. So ultimately, this boils down to the need to continue affirmative action right now until we achieve that critical mass that we talked about. Once we achieve that critical mass and our institutions and our collegiate levels are more well-rounded, then we can talk about removing it in some institutions. But right now, it's aiding minority groups in gaining equal footing on the educational platform. It's propelling both our society and our nation to further advancement. And the people that are backing this right now are major corporations, former military leaders. Over 100 colleges and universities have signed a petition and siding with the University of Texas right now. And of course, all the student organizations and labor unions are jumping on board. And they're supporting the principle that diversity right now in college is still crucial, and ultimately it's still imperative. And we also have a reputation to uphold. The United States prides itself on being nothing but the very best, not just nationally, but on a global level. And we see that with our economy. We need to continue to communicate, collaborate, argue, and network with other countries in aspects of national affairs, government affairs, health issues, finances, economics, etc. All of that we handle globally, and we need to continue to uphold that reputation by producing people that are more relatable and can communicate effectively with other countries. The acting litigation director of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund agrees, and he said that these students advance the university's educational mission. The point of having broad diversity is to bring together people from different backgrounds so that they can experience each other as peers in a shared educational environment. So questions to consider. When will we deem that affirmative action has successfully achieved diversity on college campuses? And when will we achieve that subjective critical mass if there isn't a statistical number to define it? Just some final remarks. The Supreme Court is scheduled to give a ruling on the Fisher case later this spring or early summer. It's going to dictate a lot of stuff for all those stakeholders we mentioned. And what will you do when the ruling comes out? I'm sure a lot of us have little sisters or little brothers or cousins that this is going to immediately affect. If you're considering being a professor or entering the educational sector, that's going to affect your job. And finally, it's going to affect who employs you. Businesses are waiting to hear what this ruling is going to be. And that's just a picture of the line groups. Thank you.